To do those things is a testament to the capabilities of our engineers, our men, and ingenuity. But space is a frontier, and we're still explorers. We are not colonizing space yet. We are exploring the frontiers. We are pushing it, but there are risks connected to it, and we never forget them.
But let's remember this is a historic mission for Tim Peake and for Britain. You two are good buddies. What are your thoughts on his mission, his spacewalk?
We belong to action, so we entered the space adventure together. We also have we share more other things in common. We are both test pilots. As a matter of fact, he's a helicopter test pilot. I was a fighter pilot turned helicopter test pilot, and we both have young children, and we spend a lot of our time together in Houston. He's a good friend. He's an amazing person. I always wish him all the best, and I think he did a tremendous job today.
And now a special bond between you, two European astronauts who've done a spacewalk.
And the beauty of that is that by sharing that experience, it creates an extra bond. I would say that it's almost a special club of people that have the privilege of working, living inside the space station and outside the space station, and that shared experience will multiply every time we can connect through it.
So just take us back up to the space station. Tim Peake is now, he was outside for a good 4 hours, wasn't he, working against the pressurised suit. Just describe how tired mentally and physically he will be and how long it takes to recover.
So let's not forget that other than the 4 hours that he's been outside the space station, he was inside the spacesuit, inside the space station for another 2 hours, getting ready to go outside. That also counts, the discomfort, the fatigue, the impossibility to eat anything. So right now it feels just like having done a race of sorts. He's probably tired, a little bit fatigued. He's excited, everything went well, especially after a little bit of extra adrenaline. And soon enough they will be setting up the spacesuits again so that they will be clean and ready for the next service. They will also do a very quick debrief where they will hit the Megan point of the EVA, and then it's going to be finally time for some deserved rest, dinner, and then a call to the family probably.
So that was it for Tim Peake, his first venture out into the void. There's every chance with 5.5 months left of his mission to the ISS that he will get another chance, perhaps to complete the cabling work that was so early interrupted.
Thomas, thanks very much indeed. Thomas Moore there in Cologne for us. 6 medical volunteers have been hospitalised following, including one man who is now brain dead after taking part in a botched drug test at a private clinic in France. Speaking at a news conference in the last hour, officials confirmed there is no known antidote to the experimental drug, which was being tested. Sky's Katie Spencer reports.
BioTrial had been testing a drug to tackle motor neurone disease. It's now at the centre of a major investigation, with doctors confirming that 6 men are critically ill. One is in a coma.
The patient's condition worsened rapidly to the point that he is now actually brain dead. The other patients have also worsened. Today we can say 4 of 5 have various neurological problems. 3 are sufficiently unwell that we worry about a disability that is irreversible, and that's a best-case scenario.
The experimental painkiller was made by Portuguese drug company Bial. It had already been tested on chimpanzees, but not humans. BioTrial's promotional video is designed to reassure volunteers who are thinking about taking part in its clinical trials. The company insists international regulations and procedures were followed at every stage of the study. Since July, 90 volunteers had been given the drug. These cases appear to be the first reported problem. But that's little consolation to relatives whose loved ones were once healthy and are now critically ill.
The
shock for the family is even greater because the people who take part in these tests are healthy, so they cannot expect something like this. I would also like to thank them for what they were doing. Taking part in clinical trials is extremely important.
The men were taking part in a first-in-man study, or Phase 1 trial. It's carried out to test the safety of a new medicine. They generally involve just a small number of healthy volunteers. The tests enable researchers to work out the correct dose that might be given, as well as checking for side effects. Volunteers are given small doses which are increased if they don't experience any side effects. But there's an unavoidable element of risk, as it'll usually be the first time the medicine has been tried on humans.
You're dealing with very healthy individuals here, and all of these test compounds have actually gone through extensive preclinical testing in a number of species to test to see whether there's any toxic side effects. So in order to get such a reaction when it's been tested in man is very unusual indeed.
Doctors treating the men say there is no known antidote. For now, all they can do is wait. Katie Spencer, Sky News.
Alleged sex abuse victims, Lord Janner, are said to be devastated that all criminal proceedings against him have been dropped following his death. Meanwhile, the Goddard Inquiry, an independent inquiry examining historical child sex abuse in England and Wales, will resume its investigations into the late Labour peer. Sky's Tom Parmenter is at the police headquarters for us. Tom, difficult news for people to digest, but at least they have the inquiries.
Yes, that is what they have got to hold on to, but nevertheless it is not the criminal process that they wanted to see. For these people who have lined up to say that they were abused by Greville Janner, they've had decades of not being believed, years of a police investigation here at Leicestershire Police where they've gone over once again the case and built a very convincing case that led to those 22 charges of child sexual abuse allegations among others. And also we know that they've had months waiting for the courts to decide whether or not Lord Janner was fit to stand trial. Of course, his death in December changed all that, and the hearing at the Old Bailey today, the conclusion there effectively was 2 words: defendant deceased. It has had a huge impact on those who have claimed that Lord Janner abused them in children's homes here in Leicestershire and elsewhere. This is what Liz Dux, who represented a number of those alleged victims, had to say about how they're feeling now about the end of this case.
They feel absolutely gutted that having seen justice within grasp of their hands, that it's been pulled away from them. They've waited for so long and actually never been given reasons why this hadn't come to court before now, when Janner was alive and well to answer those allegations. And now to be denied this opportunity, they're just gutted.
Now, Lord Janner's family have always denied any wrongdoing on his behalf, and they did so right up until his death. But there are fundamental questions as to whether or not this was another powerful individual linked to Westminster who was able to get away with child abuse. Those facts haven't yet been tested, and it will fall to the independent child abuse inquiry led by Lowell Goddard, the New Zealand judge, to look at this case. They've said that that will happen. What they will find, of course, we don't yet know, but they will certainly look at the individual cases and see if there are things that cross-check between those allegations and then come to some kind of conclusion. But the inquiry is very much about finding fault with institutions that may have let children down rather than people who may have been criminally responsible. Institutions, in this case, the Labour Party, like indeed the CPS and the police here in the East Midlands. There were, we know, many opportunities that were missed to perhaps bring this case far earlier on. Janner was well. And one footnote to this, Leicestershire Police have today said that their investigation is not over at all. There are other suspects, other allegations that they continue to look at. Whether or not they are connected to Lord Janner, they haven't yet said.
Tom, thanks very much indeed. You're watching Sky News.
It is not a sense of envy. It's I look at it with a lot of happiness because Tim is one of my classmates. So to be able to share those emotions, it's almost like multiplying them.
Tell us about the emotions that he would have been feeling when he got into his spacesuit, then he had the oxygen to. Apparently you have to have pure oxygen for a couple of hours before you even think about getting into the airlock. Talk us through that process.
So initially, when you are in the airlock, you are breathing oxygen, so in order to purge your body of nitrogen. That's a safety precaution so that you don't incur in any decompression sickness when you're outside, because the atmosphere inside the suit is a lot less. But then, those hours, they get you just ready and prepped for stepping outside, and I think the emotions are so mixed when you go outside. There is almost like two split people. There is the professional and there is the human person inside the spacesuit at the same time walking outside.
What is the first thing that you see when you go outside? I suppose it depends on the time of day.
Absolutely. It depends on whether it's dark or light. If it's dark, the first thing that you see is probably your feet, because you're going to try and be very careful stepping outside that you don't impact anything on the side. The spacesuit is what is protecting you from the harsh environment outside. However, if it's day outside, on my second EVA, I stepped out head first into the day. And the view is absolutely astounding. There are no words to describe its beauty.
What is it that you
Protests against Saudi Arabia are spreading across the Muslim world.
Decided to cut off all diplomatic relations with Iran. We will also be cutting off all air traffic to and from Iran.
Unfortunately, the government of Saudi Arabia sees its existence and interests through creating clashes and escalating tensions in the region.
The Queen's grandson, Peter Phillips, has defended plans for a street party costing £150 a ticket for Her Majesty's 90th birthday, saying it'll have a carnival atmosphere. The event, which will be attended by Princes William and Harry, will be the culmination of a weekend of national celebrations in June. Sky's Ian Woods reports.
What do you get your grandmother for 90th birthday when Gran happens to be Queen? If you're Peter Phillips, you give her a neighbourhood street party on the road that leads up to her house. But he's charging people £150 a ticket.
What do people get for their money?
Well, I mean, apart from being here at this amazing location and fantastically unique event, I mean, this is a one-off event, you get your personal picnic, you get a seat at the table, you get to enjoy the atmosphere.
There's usually no charge for atmosphere at royal celebrations, and there's no entrance fee when the Queen invites you to one of her garden parties. Royal street celebrations are usually low-budget affairs. But the tickets for the Patrons' Lunch in June will go mainly to the 600 charities which the Queen is linked to, and they can sell them for a profit.
The ticketing criteria allows them to be able to sell 40% of their tickets to cover the cost of the event, and hopefully actually raise a lot more money on top of that for themselves. And as I said, for them this is a platform. This event's about them. It's a platform for them to be able to celebrate the fact that the Queen is their patron.
Some of the charities we spoke to said they'd be giving their tickets to long-serving volunteers as a thank you.
Of course, there have been plenty of royal events on the Mall before, but nothing quite like this one. And if there are concerns about the price of the tickets, at least the people who are going to be buying them actually want to be here. The taxpayer won't be footing the bill.
But there are reputational risks for the sector. 30 years ago, Prince Edward took flack when his company organised It's a Royal Knockout to raise funds for charity. Peter's mum will remember that event.
The Queen does a fantastic job by herself. When these sort of young men in the royal family who think that they can promote their own companies try to get a bit of a slice of the action, it normally doesn't do her any favours at all.
You come under more scrutiny as one of the organisers than if you weren't a member of the family. Are you prepared for that?
Oh, clearly. I mean, it adds a whole load of pressure on it, because if you get it wrong, then you sit around the dinner table and everyone starts getting at you.
According to her grandson, Her Majesty is looking forward to the event. But then she won't have to buy a ticket. Ian Woods, Sky News.
You're watching Sky News.
We hope that the nuclear deal will prevent Iran from acquiring nuclear capabilities, that it has a robust and continuous inspection mechanism, and that has a provision for snapback of the sanctions should Iran violate those terms. We have been assured by the United States and the other P5+1 countries that this in fact is the case, and as a consequence we have welcomed this deal when it was announced. So the idea that Saudi Arabia is opposed to this deal or lobbying against it is not correct.
How worried is your government, though, about the possibility of all this money being unfrozen, all these Iranian assets being unfrozen around the world and being spent in whatever direction Iran chooses now in future?
Every country in the world is worried about this, because Iran's record, unfortunately, is not a perfect record when it comes to being a nation state that acts in a reasonable manner. Iran's record has been one of war and destruction, terrorism, assassination, destabilization, interference in the affairs of other countries. And the concern that most countries in the world have is that Iran not use these funds in order to fund these destabilizing activities, and instead use those funds in order to improve the standard of living of its people.
You've talked about Iran not behaving like a nation state, and you've warned of countermeasures that your government could take if that continues. What kind of countermeasures are we talking about?
We've cut off diplomatic relations with Iran, we cut off commercial relations with Iran, we cut off air travel to and from Iran, and we have a travel warning and prohibition of travel to Iran by our citizens. We are supporting our allies and our friends who are suffering from aggression by Iran and from interference by Iran in their internal affairs, and we will assess things as they move along, but we will not stand idly by while the Iranians try to spread their influence and their mischief in the region.
People in the West are used to seeing Saudi Arabia as a conservative, rather inscrutable nation, but one that has been seen and presented by Western governments as a sort of bastion of stability. In recent days and weeks, we've seen headlines talking about Saudi Arabia's leadership as being reckless, impulsive, aggressive. These aren't the adjectives we normally hear.
Only too recently ago, people were criticizing Saudi Arabia, including in your media in Britain, for not taking a leadership role. Saudi Arabia needs to step up and take a leadership role. The West cannot be the policeman of the Gulf. The West cannot protect the Saudis. The Saudis have all this money and they're sitting on it and they want to hold our coattails while we go to battle with them. These were the words we were hearing from everyone, including from people in the British press. Now that Saudi Arabia stepped up and taken decisive action in Yemen, in supporting the Syrian opposition, in standing up to Iran, people are saying, why are the Saudis doing this? It's reckless. It's one of those positions where it's damn if we do, damn if we don't. Make up your mind.
You're watching Sky News. These are tonight's top stories for you. NASA has terminated Major Tim Peake's historic spacewalk early after a fellow astronaut discovered water inside his helmet. Mission Control says it doesn't qualify as an emergency situation. 6 medical volunteers have been taken to hospital in France after taking part in a drug test at a private clinic. Officials say there is no known antidote to the experimental drug which was being tested. People who say they were abused by the Labour peer Lord Janner say they're devastated that all criminal proceedings against him have been dropped following his death. Now, the UN has confirmed cases of severe malnutrition among children in the besieged Syrian town of Madaya. Local aid workers have reported at least 32 deaths from starvation in the town, 40 miles outside the capital, Damascus, and that's just in the past month. We're joined by Dr. Peter Salama, UNICEF's Regional Director for the Middle East and North Africa, who has helped coordinate the convoys to Madaya. Thanks very much indeed for joining us, Dr. Salama. Presumably, you have heard first-hand stories of what's happening in the town. What's your reaction?
Yeah, we've heard harrowing stories about the plight of the civilian population in Madaya. They're exhausted, they're frightened, they're increasingly emaciated, and they're desperate for support from the international community.
Okay, what are you hoping will happen tonight in New York, for example? The Security Council discussing this problem again. Do you think there may be any kind of progress from that?
Well, we're really hoping this meeting represents a turning point for the civilian population in Syria. We must call for, and the meeting at the Security Council is a rare opportunity to finally get a lifting of all of the situations of siege in Syria. It's Madaya, but it's not just Madaya. There are 14 or more other Madayas with 10 times that population.
Well, our Skype has dropped out there. Communications are difficult between us and the Middle East at the moment. We may pick that up again if we return. Meanwhile, bring you another story from today's bulletin. Police are still hunting a final suspect in the Hatton Garden raid amid fears he may have fled the country with £10 million worth of jewels. The missing man, known only as Basil, is thought to have been a key player in the heist. A former Fly Squad officer told Sky News that officers will be scrutinising his communication with other members of the gang. Sky's crime correspondent Martin Brunt reports on the one that got away.
Basil had the key to the front door and was the cleverest of them all. He dressed in black. He wore no distinctive clothing. He always carried a bin bag on his shoulder to hide his face from CCTV. Unlike the others, he didn't meet up again and get caught in the lens of a police surveillance camera. And his share of the loot was the gold and cash, the easiest of the stolen goods to convert and launder. The others had jewels, much of them identifiable and difficult to disguise.
If Basil's managed to evade the net so far, the money's maybe got to be on Basil continuing to evade the net, unless, of course, they are aware of who he is and just can't get a hold of him.
But there are potential clues to Basil's identity. His name probably is Basil. The gang referred to each other by their real names and to him as Basil. CCTV shows a glimpse of red hair, but it could be a wig. In a bugged car, Terry Perkins and Danny Jones talk of him having to come all the way over again. Basil could be foreign. It was his job to disable the alarm system. Perhaps Basil's an electrical expert. He squeezed through the vault wall. Basil is not a big man. In their hunt for Basil, police are offering a reward of £20,000. They hope that's enough to prompt information from somebody who knows him, perhaps another criminal. These ageing robbers, burglars and thieves pleaded guilty to the raid and are awaiting sentence. Police described them as the masterminds, but they got caught. Maybe Basil was the real mastermind of the Hatton Garden heist. Martin Brunt, Sky News.
And you can watch Martin Brunt's special report, Hatton Garden, One Last Job, at 3:30 tomorrow and again at 8:30 on Sunday evening. There's a warning to parents tonight that their children's education is being harmed by soaring class sizes as oversubscribed schools struggle to cope with demand. On the annual deadline day for primary school applications, new research shows how many will be put on a waiting list or end up in a so-called supersized class. Sky's Emma Birchley reports.
OK, now, put your hand up if you can tell me where the apostrophe...
A literacy lesson for 33 children. Too many, according to Labour,
who warn that more than 500,000 primary school pupils are now being taught in so-called supersized classes.
There is evidence that larger class sizes can have an impact on discipline in the classroom and on attainment, and that's why the last Labour government said that we wanted infants to be in class sizes of 30 or less. We've seen a dramatic move in the opposite direction.
Better Matilda, what would you do?
Well, I'd put like kings or governors.
But at Waldringfield Primary School, at least, it doesn't seem to be an issue.
We cater for all abilities, and that would be the case if it was 10 children, if it was 33 children. It doesn't make a difference. I think the children love it. I think they like the fact that they've got lots of people to bounce ideas off of.
The problem, according to the opposition, is there simply aren't enough places, blaming what they describe as the government's obsession with independently run but state-funded free schools, while not allowing new schools to be opened by local authorities. The National Union of Teachers wants that to change.
It's a problem that's getting worse. So we've now got more than 500,000 children in classes over 30. We've got 38,000 in classes over 36. We've got 15,000 kids in classes over 40. And our concerns are for the children in these situations.
But the government says more than 400,000 new places have already been created since Labour left power.
The average infant class size today is 27.4. It's been 27.4 for many, many years. So there has been no change in the average class size in the infant school. And over that same period, we have been creating more school places, 450,000 more school places today than in 2010.
Big classes may not always be ideal, but none of these children seem to mind.
Well, I think it's better being the big class than the small class because you've got more people around you to help you.
I've had to have some friends since reception, and then new people have joined, and then I've been able to make friends with them. You get to work with other people and it's quite fun.
Nearly half of all schools in England are oversubscribed, with catchment areas getting smaller and smaller. And on deadline day for primary applications, it makes for an anxious wait for parents. Emma Birchley, Sky News, Suffolk.
The author of the World Anti-Doping Agency's damning report into corruption in athletics has told Sky News it would be naive to think that Russia is the only country with a doping problem or that athletics is the only guilty sport. Speaking to our sports editor, Paul Kelso, Dick Pound also said that athletics governing body should investigate whether or not there was corruption in the awarding of Olympic Games, television contracts and sponsorships.
In our first report, we said, look, let's make one thing straight. Our mandate is very narrow, but it would be naive to think that Russia is the only country with a doping problem and that athletics is the only sport with a doping problem. That's about all we can say, but I think anybody who's willing to read between the lines will get the message.
That there's the likelihood that this is a problem that extends beyond.
It extends beyond athletics, and it extends beyond Russia. We had witness statements from a number of mostly confidential informants saying, you know, this is going on. We record that, but we don't have any definite proof like we did with the other stuff. So we say to the IAAF, you should know about this, and you should extend whatever forensic auditing you're doing to cover these things.
So they should examine whether there was corruption of the award of Olympic Games.
Right, and whether there were payments and so forth. Yes, I think that's something that they would want to know. Same with awarding sponsorships, same with awarding television contracts.
To Hong Kong now, where mystery surrounds the disappearance of 5 well-known booksellers, all outspoken critics of the Chinese government. The men, one of whom is a British citizen, have gone missing over the course of the last few months. Amid concerns, they've been taken to China. From Hong Kong, our Asia correspondent Katie Stallard reports.
Amongst the skyscrapers in the neon back streets of Hong Kong's famous shopping district, you might not notice at first that anything was wrong here. But then you see the missing posters. Appeals for help finding 5 men, booksellers all, disappeared, feared detained by Chinese security forces. Inside, the security gate is padlocked shut, but through a small gap you can make out the rows of bookshelves in the darkness. An unanswered phone ringing somewhere in the distance beyond. They specialised in the provocative gossip about the Communist Party leadership, legal here but banned in mainland China. They were rumoured to be working on a new book about President Xi Jinping. Most people here didn't want to speak on camera. Those who did told us they were afraid of where it was heading.
Maybe after 10 years, everything is changed in Hong Kong. So we're worried that we hope that the Hong Kong government can actually do a detailed investigation.
The disappearances started with writer and publisher Gui Minhui. Last seen at his holiday home in Pattaya, Thailand, he had emailed printers on the 15th of October telling them to get ready for a new book. The following week, 3 more members of staff went missing, all while visiting family separately on the Chinese mainland. Their colleague, British citizen Li Bo, raised the alarm, but on the 30th of December he too vanished, this time from the streets of Hong Kong. This is the last place Li Bo was seen, the publishing company's warehouse. A few days after he disappeared, he managed to speak to his wife on the phone. He told her he was calling from Shenzhen, a city just across the border on the Chinese mainland, where he was assisting an investigation. But that call raises as many questions as it answers. Firstly, he was speaking in Mandarin, not his usual Cantonese. Secondly, she discovered he hadn't taken his travel permit, the document he should have used to cross the border if he really did go there of his own free will.
First, they came for the activists.
19-year-old student Agnes Chow posted this video appeal online. It's had almost 1 million views so far. She told us shares the freedoms promised to Hong Kong during the handover from British rule are now under threat. And when they start coming for the booksellers, it's time to speak out.
All of the government should speak up and should help Hong Kong people to protect our own basic human rights. It's not only about like democracy or freedom, it's about our own personal safety.
Hong Kong's chief executive, CY Leung, is under pressure to show he's standing up for those rights. Have you raised the case of the missing booksellers with the authorities in Beijing, and do you have any credible information about where they are and what's happened to them?
I have. The short answer is I have, because there had been reports of mainland authorities arresting the person or abducting the person in Hong Kong, and said if that was the case, then it would not be acceptable.
Which is all very well, but what he didn't say is that he's any closer to finding out what happened to the men. Katie Stallard, Sky News in Hong Kong.
You're watching Sky News.
Look, are we seeing more sort of outrageous imagery of tobacco and alcohol use on these music videos?
I would definitely say so, but it hasn't just, it's not a boom just overnight. It's been going on for a long time. It's just got a lot more excessive, I think, over the last 2-3 years, probably this YouTube generation.
And the call is that it's precisely YouTube that needs censoring, because elsewhere we do have that censorship already in place.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we have watersheds and obviously television series. I mean, not that MTV really play much music videos anymore, but on YouTube itself, you don't need any restrictions whatsoever to watch anything. I think uploaders can put things on there and put that it's got an 18 rating, but if it's their responsibility, they don't have to do that.
See, the problem is with some of this is that it's the market it's aimed at. And we know the research is saying it's 13 to 15-year-olds who are most being exposed to this. There's a big problem, isn't there, that people older than that, and parents particularly, are completely out of the loop as to what's being shown.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, a lot of the videos that we're talking about here are actually made and directed at